You may have noticed that from time to time I post videos related to music on this channel. The reason is that I'm not just a philosopher, I'm also a musicologist. Sometimes people ask me, what do musicologists do? Well, that's not an easy question to answer, just as it is not easy to answer what it is that philosophers do in one sentence. Nevertheless, I've decided to show you one of the things musicologists do, namely analyzing music. Before we start, I need to mention that because of copyright issues, I won't be able to use any performance of the piece I'm about to analyze. So you will have to do the listening on your own. I would also like to mention that I'm presuming you are already familiar with basic music terminology. It would make no sense to explain the terminology and analyze the music at the same time. Let's start. For this episode, I've chosen the first movement of Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata. Not because I'm particularly in love with it, but because its analysis is straightforward. I personally prefer Beethoven's later compositions, but for this episode, we'll focus on Waldstein Sonata. If it goes well, I can analyze something much more complicated for you next time. Perhaps a symphony by Mahler or Scriabin. So let's get to Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata. This movement is in C major and it is in sonata form. In what follows, I will outline the major sections of the piece. Let's talk about the exposition. Look at bars 1 to 13. We need to locate a theme in these bars. Now, what is a theme? A theme is comprised of rhythm and melody, and the opening line of Waldstein confirms this definition of a theme by asserting its rhythmic potency on us. In fact, rhythm is the force that propels most of the various themes and sections of this sonata. As a general rule of the classical period, the exposition must be in the tonic key, but in Waldstein there is a sense of uncertainty regarding the key in which the piece is set. The sonata is said to be in C major, and indeed we do hear the music begin with a low C, followed by 13 consecutive C major chords. However, except for these rhythmically powerful 13 chords, we cannot be certain that we are in the key of C major, because a single chord is not enough to establish a key. In order to find out in which key we are, we need at least two chords, the tonic and the dominant. This is what makes analyzing the first movement of Waldstein challenging right from the start. Instead of getting a tonic chord followed by its dominant, we realize that the C major chord itself acts as a subdominant chord which is followed by the dominant chord of G major, which is to say a D major chord. When we reach G major, we notice that the lower C in the bass drops a half step from C to B. This process is repeated when the bass line drops another half step to B flat. At this point, the phrase parallels the opening line of the movement by repeating the B flat major chord 14 times. Once again, we see that the bass line drops another half step and through a C minor chord resolves to F major. The C minor chord, by the way, is the dominant chord of F major. When the bass line drops yet another half step from A to A flat, the music momentarily shifts to F minor. Finally, the bass line drops a half step for one last time to G, and then it swings back and forth between G and A flat in bars 9 and 10 before settling on G in bar 11. After all this, the harmony resolves to a C minor chord in bar 12. Not C major. At the end, the final G in bar 13 concludes the first theme of the exposition. This final G, which we hear in theme 1, immediately resolves to C major in bar 14. And this is the first time in the music that we get a sense of resolution by stepping in the tonic key. Let's look at the figures in theme 1. Before we move on to the next section, it is crucial to point out that the first 13 bars contain 3 figures with which Beethoven works throughout the piece. Figure 1 can be located in the first two measures of the piece. Figure 2 is located in the third bar. And lastly, figure 3 can't be found in the fourth bar. This is very typical of Beethoven. He works with themes that are very brief and simple. You see this pattern not just in Waldstein, but also in the rest of his sonatas and symphonies and everything else. Now let's move on to bars 14 to 22. The counter statement which follows the theme is characterized by a succession of 16th note tremolos in the bass. Just as the beginning of the main theme, the key of G major is tonicized in the beginning of the counter statement. This does not last for long, and in bar 20 the key of A minor is tonicized. Before concluding the first theme and its counter statement, the A in the bass is raised a half step to A sharp. This allows the chord in bar 22 to act as the borrowed dominant of the B major chord which starts the modulating bridge. So far we have seen more than a few changes of keys during this part of the exposition. One might be tempted to regard the main theme of the exposition as a mishmash of various keys. There is a way out of this mess. The best solution to this problem is to use the Roman letters in a hierarchical way. This means that we call the first phrase as a whole a 5 chord, and the second phrase a 4 chord, and we relate the chords within each phrase to this overall harmonic function. Following this model, we realize that a general pattern emerges, and it looks like what you see on the screen. Now let's look at bars 23 to 34. The modulating bridge that spans for 12 bars begins with a descending group of 5 notes. It is important to point out that these notes are related to figure 3. Then a series of broken chords pave the way to the second theme of the movement. This is where we get to bars 35 to 51. Following the modulating bridge, the second theme of the exposition begins in E major. Bars 35 to 36 refer to figure 3. In the soprano, we hear a group of 5 descending notes which are based on the descending notes we encountered in figure 3. In contrast to the rhythmic force of the first theme, the second theme implies a sense of calm and lyricism. Importantly, this theme is an 8-bar theme and its structure is 4+4. The theme is repeated in triplets during the next 8 bars, and its final bar overlaps with a new 2-bar theme, which can be found in bars 50 to 51. This new theme is our figure 4. This theme is characterized by syncopation. Look at bars 52 to 85. The cadence material starts in E major, and it is initially marked by 8th note triplets. The rhythm in bars 52 and 53 is syncopated due to the presence of figure 4. From bar 58 onwards, the music progresses from 8th note triplets to faster 16th notes, and the cadence expands in bars 62 to 73. The second half of the cadence is set during bars 74 to 85. This part has elements of E minor. Lastly, we encounter the final figure, which is to say the figure 5 of the exposition during this part of the cadence. Beethoven is gonna work with all these themes that we have seen in the development section. This brings us to bar 86. The development section begins in F major, and its melody during the first 4 bars is derived from figure 5. The rest of the movement is pretty straightforward, so I'm just gonna give you the number of the bars and tell you what happens in them very quickly. Bars 90 to 103. We hear the opening theme during bars 90 to 95. In bar 96, we have figures 1 and 2 side by side in one bar. This structure repeats itself in various sequences until bar 102. Bar 104 consists of the descending 5 notes similar to figure 3. Bars 104 to 110. The pattern of the previous section breaks. The bass starts descending and figure 2 is grouped in a 2-bar form. The groupings in bars 104 to 107 is more regular. 3 sequences of figure 2 followed by a half note. Bars 136 to 155. This section prepares us and paves the way to return to the main theme. That's basically the development section. The recapitulation is even more straightforward. From this point on, the remainder of the music is devoted to recapitulation. Unlike most traditional sonatas, the recapitulation is not in the tonic. In this case, that would have meant the key of C major. Rather, it is in the key of A major. Let me quickly give you the number of the bars and tell you what happens in them. Bars 155 to 167 parallel bars 1 to 12. Bars 174 to 183 parallel bars 14 to 22. Bars 184 to 195 parallel bars 23 to 34, and so on. I should also mention that bars 167 to 168 parallel bars 12 to 13. However, the final note is a semitone higher. It is A flat, not G. And finally we have bars 249 to 302. The coda begins with theme 1 in D flat major and ends in C major.